Thank you for coming today, Eric. I really appreciate it. This might be a little difficult for me, Alicia. Please explain again what you need from me. Of course, as I mentioned on the phone, I'm writing a doctoral dissertation on victim psychology. I am trying to show the psychological differences, if any, between different types of victims. I have met or have already met people who survived terrorist attacks, a woman who was kidnapped, two people who were abused, a child and a wife, and three spouses who were deceived. Each spouse reacted to betrayal differently. I am most interested in the emotions of the victims immediately before and after the episode in order to study and perhaps help others cope better with emotional distress. As I already mentioned, I will not use real names in my dissertation and will try to avoid mentioning events that could identify you in order to protect your innocence as much as possible. I will also allow you, if you wish, to read my dissertation before submitting it. There may be a lot of psychological terms in it. Alicia McDonald was the wife of one of my closest friends, known to everyone as Mac. They were married for over 30 years. The other day, she called me out of the blue and explained all this. I was a little nervous and scared about how I would cope with bringing up old wounds. However, Alicia was a good friend of mine and helped me, or tried to help me, in my time of need many years ago. Okay, but why now? Why didn't you finish your PhD all those years ago? After I finished my master's, we started having kids, and now that the boys have finally moved in, I think it's time. My old professor, Helen Robinson, is still there and encourages me to complete the requirements for my PhD. I assume you are quite familiar with her. Yes, you bring up so many memories, some of them quite painful. Sorry, Eric. Perhaps retelling your story will be a form of therapy for you, if that's what you need. Eric, I will take notes and record your story. My notes will focus on your implied reactions as you share details. Please use first person when talking about yourself and use third person when talking about me rather than second person. Try to treat me like someone who doesn't know any details. Okay, this might be a little weird, but I'll try. Where should I start? What should I focus on? And how should I end the story? That's a great question. Focus on the days, weeks, and months before and after the cheating until you decide what you're going to do about it. I think it will be very helpful to start with courtship and emotional needs at the beginning of your marriage, and at the end you can talk about how you felt throughout the years after the betrayal. How often did you think about this? How often did it come up? How do you think you dealt with this story emotionally? I'll focus on emotions. Please try to be as factual as possible and don't overanalyze yourself. The only thing that doesn't need to be said, and I will describe this in my doctoral dissertation, is that I know you and your strong beliefs about right and wrong and your strong sense of ethics. I will use this and try to explain as best I can the decision you made. With my other two victims of infidelity, one man and one woman, I don't have that knowledge, so I'll have to pull it out of them, which might be difficult for me. Okay, Alicia, play the record. The main event of my story happened about 30 years ago. It was a little after my 30th birthday. I worked for the same company where I planned to retire. I'm a vice president with stock options worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. We were a small company at the time of the incident. I was one of the first 10 employees hired by the then owner, president, and CEO, my great friend Sam Murray. Sam and I did not know each other before I joined his firm, but over the years we have developed a very close professional and personal relationship. I had been working for Sam for about 7 years at the time of the incident, and there were two other people who were then working for the company who were key figures in my story, my wife Sandy and our best salesman, George Thomas. They say that the husband is always the last one to find out. In this case, I'm sure I was the third one to understand it, and the first two already knew. I headed the after-sales service department at SM Services. My job was to manage all active accounts, make sure our clients were happy with our services and solutions, and I was responsible for negotiating and renewing all contracts. All George had to do was attract the client, sign the initial contract, and move on to the next one. George had a partner in crime, and it was his boss, Alex Jensen. Alex was older than George, But as soon as Alex hired George, our sales took off. George started about 2 years after me, and when George came in, I needed to build a team for all the new business he brought in. That's when Sandra Elkins came along. She was this bright-eyed, smart as a whip girl, fresh out of her bachelor's degree in management and eager to work. I say girl because she was only 21 and I was almost 26 at the time. During the interview, it never occurred to me that we would date, fall in love, and eventually get married. This was so far beyond professionalism. If you asked Sandy, she thought of me as the older person who would become her boss if she passed all my requirements. She also never considered romantic relationships during the interview process. In fact, I was only 5 years older than her, but I suppose working for more than 4 years gave me maturity. She thought I was much older than 26. I didn't have a big budget and Sandy was very inexpensive. She was also outgoing, very knowledgeable, very smart, and even I noticed, very attractive, which I thought would also help with the client base. I hired her. I decided we should share an office in an open plan with room to grow. Pete and Tammy joined a few years later, and I had my team to manage the growing business. In my personal life, I went out on the occasional date, usually a blind date set up by one of my sisters, but rarely did I meet anyone I wanted to go out with for a second time. I sometimes met with my friends from college. There were four of us: Jerry, Bobby, and Mac. Jerry married his high school sweetheart, Laura, and they were expecting their second child. Bobby met Juanita at work. Bobby was a salesman for a bed linen and towel manufacturer, and Juanita was a buyer for bed, bath, and beyond. They met and married within 9 months of their first date. We recently celebrated Mac's wedding to Alicia, so I was the last bachelor left. Laura, Juanita, and Alicia always gave me the names and numbers of their girlfriends. I managed to get to a third date with one of Alicia's friends, but she wasn't interested in a long-term relationship. Most of the time I was married to work. One of the obligations I had to fulfill was to participate in exhibitions. I always went with either Alex or George. It was at one of these exhibitions that I saw George's true personality twice. It was a 2-day show in Vegas, and at the time I think I only had Sandy on my team. I believed that Sandy was competent enough to manage clients, and I was always just a phone call away. This was before the age of email and cell phones, much less smartphones. George manned the booth while I listened to the questions potential clients asked and his answers. I've never heard so much nonsense in my life. He promised mountains of gold, and then I had to fulfill these promises. George, what is this? You know that we cannot meet their demands. Why do you make such promises? I told him privately. Eric, my boy, this is how the sales world works. We need to attract the client, and then I count on you to keep the client happy. George, have you ever done a cost analysis for a company to provide a profitable solution for these customers? Eric, it's not my problem. My job is to attract clients. Does Alex know you're doing this? Actually, I knew about these crazy deals we were signing, but I didn't realize it was George doing it, not Alex. Alex, he doesn't know shit. Last year, I raised over $4 million in revenue, while Alex is still in the $2 million to $2,500,000 range. It's not fair that as my boss, he gets a commission from my business. I think I should renegotiate my terms with Sam. I was going to say that I think I should tell Sam what you're doing, but I didn't say anything. I decided to do an analysis of all the businesses that George had attracted and our costs of providing solutions. George was much older than me. He was about 40 years old. He was even older than Sam and Alex, who were in their 30s. After dinner with George, he suggested going to the hotel bar. We met many potential buyers there, and everyone was drinking and having fun. George caught me alone for a second. Hey, Eric, see that blonde with big breasts? How can you not notice her? She practically falls out of the dress. $10 and I can get her into bed within 30 minutes. George, you're married. What would your wife say? This chain and core, she won't say anything. We have sex once a week, and she just lies there like a damn statue. This little thing looks like a living wire there. She looks half your age. Why would she want an old guy like you? Because I have 7 inches that she doesn't have. I'm also like the Energizer battery. I don't stop for quite a long time, and I have a reputation in these circles. You mean you do this all the time? Yes, at every exhibition, but I have my limits. I never go to married people. All I need is one angry husband to come after me. This little thing doesn't have a ring. Last night it was that brunette in the corner. She's recently divorced and boy was she on fire last night. She was really hungry. You should try it. Well, if she was so good, why not go for a second round? Another rule of mine, once is enough, I don't need any attachments. Remember, I'm married. Try it yourself. I think her name is Carolyn or Catherine, something like that. Sorry, George, I usually start a relationship before I sleep with a woman. Whatever you want, son, your loss. George approached the blonde, and after a few minutes they were laughing. After 15 minutes I saw her grab his hand, and they started to leave. Before he left, he stopped by the brunette and started talking to her, and they were looking right at me. George left with the blonde, and soon the brunette started walking towards me. Eric, huh? Hello. Sorry, George didn't remember your name. My name is Jackie or Jacqueline. My mom calls me Jacqueline, but my friends call me Jackie. I hear this is your first exhibition. No, I've been to many. This is at least my second with George, but I usually go with Alex, his boss. I'm not sure why I needed to mention that George has a boss. Jackie was from Cleveland. She worked for one of our competitors. She recently got divorced after 3 years of marriage. Her ex cheated on her twice. Deceive me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me, she said. So I said enough is enough. He promised that he would change, go to therapy and blah blah blah, but I thought, I'm only 32 years old, I can try again. Sorry for asking, how old are you? I'm 27. Cool, I'm not sure if it's good or bad, but you look older, very mature for 27. You look serious, much more than your friend George. He's not my friend, he is my colleague. He actually told me that you loved being with him and couldn't wait for him to get into your pants again. Sorry for being so vulgar. He's a real idiot. He speaks beautifully, but he is not Don Juan. Wendy will be very disappointed in 20 minutes. Who is Wendy? She's the stupid girl who left him. I told her she was wasting her time, but she was young and wanted to have fun. We started talking about other things, but eventually moved on to business. She knew about our company, but I had never heard of hers. It happens. We exchanged contact information and business cards, but my interest in Jackie was only on a professional basis. She was very attractive, but not for me. After that trip, I began conducting cost-benefit analysis on each client. I kept everything in a spreadsheet. I think I used Lotus in those days. I kept information such as deal size, customer satisfaction, customer expectations, cost to market, etc. I also linked each deal to the seller. It was either Alex, George, or Sam, who also negotiated several major deals. Shortly after that trip, we had our annual Christmas party. Sam rented a small banquet hall at a local hotel, invited a good orchestra and lots of drinks and food. Sandy had been with us for a little over a year, and I think Pete had just started. Sandy introduced Pete to the rest of the team. I don't know what it was, but she looked like an angel that night. She was wearing a loose dark blue skirt and a white blouse. Sandy had light brown hair with a few blonde streaks and wore her hair down that evening. She always wore a ponytail at work. Later, I saw her sitting alone and went over to chat. Sandy, I'm not sure if we can talk about your personal life, but if I remember from your job application, you're single. Is that correct? Married, I'm only 22. No, not married. But I bet you have a boyfriend or lover. Eric, wow, no, do you know anyone for me? Come on, you can't have trouble meeting guys. I had a boyfriend in college, but he was just for fun. He wasn't interested in any kind of commitment, So we went our separate ways. I'm not ready to get married or anything, but I need a certain maturity from a guy. Someone like you, but you're too old for me, and that wouldn't be appropriate. Yes, it's not great, but it makes me feel good. It got a little awkward, but we continued discussing other topics. I found out she was from Denver and the middle of 3 children. She has 2 brothers. She is the only girl. I told her about my 2 older sisters. I think it made me mature faster, being younger, than other people my age. She said her mom died in her junior year of college after a 4-year battle with cancer. Her father was semi-retired and helped look after his granddaughter from his older brother Sandy. They all lived in this area. I told her that my parents had moved to Florida. One of my sisters lived in Colorado Springs, which was about 90 minutes away, and the other had moved to New York. I walked Sandy to her car at the end of the evening. I wanted to kiss her on the cheek, but decided not to. That night, I couldn't sleep. Did I meet the girl of my dreams, and she was right under my nose? I couldn't do it. I was in big trouble. I spent a sleepless weekend and decided that I needed to control myself. The following Monday morning, I walked into Sam's office and told him I had a personal matter to discuss. I asked if he had time. He told me to come see him at the end of the day. What's wrong, Eric? Do you need money, a loan, or something? No, Sam, it's much more complicated. Continue. I met a young woman with whom I want to try to build a relationship. That's great. What do you need from me? A vacation? No, I need you to fire one of us. Sam looked surprised. Sam, she works here. This in itself is problematic. What makes it worse is that she works for me. Sandra. Sam always used people's real names. He would call Jackie Jacqueline. Yes, sir. Eric, this is a big problem. How far has it gone? It hasn't gone anywhere yet. We just spent a lot of time together at the party, and I thought about her all weekend. I've dated a lot of women, and she's the first one I'd really like to try. I already know her well as we share an office, and were alone for the past year until Pete joined. Do you know how she feels about you? No, sir. Well, let me discuss this with Denise. This is a potential problem on many levels. Let's say she's not interested. Can you retreat? Let's say she's interested, but you'll lose interest. We may lose a valuable employee. I've read her evaluations, and she's doing very well. I think we gave her a good promotion recently. Let's say you become a couple, and all couples have their problems. How can you ensure you don't bring your personal problems to work? This could have business implications. I do not know what to tell you. I guess you want to try it, so you're talking to me. Yes, sir. And if I tell you not to do it, what will you do? I don't know, but I won't do this behind your back. Yes, Eric, I know you too well. You're too honest for that. So you have 3 options. Either control your desires, fire her, or quit yourself. Sam, I haven't thought about it yet. I'm not ready for this. I didn't plan more than one step at a time. I know that we have provisions in our contracts prohibiting office romances. I hate to make it so formal, but this will need to change a little if I get your permission to try to build a relationship with her. Eric, let's discuss this tomorrow after I talk to Denise. I don't want to interfere with your personal happiness. Good night and try to get some sleep. Thanks, Sam. We'll talk tomorrow. The next day, I kept looking at Sandy. I listened carefully as she interacted with clients. I watched as she continued to train Pete. This may have been my least productive day since I joined SM Services. At 5 o'clock, Sam called me into his office. I talked to Denise at length last night about you. If I didn't know better, I'd think she was in love with you. I blushed. Well, what did she suggest? She said we shouldn't interfere with your personal happiness, but she thinks it would be better if I talked to Sandra to get her opinion. It won't be awkward. Do you know how? We have a solution. Denise will sit with me. She will ask questions. But Eric, what will you do if we tell you that you are wasting your time? I guess I'll have to come up with something. Let's decide this after you talk to her. The next day, Sam sent a note to all employees. He said he would evaluate each department manager and talk to all employees. This was after he had a meeting with all the department heads where he explained what he was doing. A few years later, I learned that when Sam met with George and asked him to evaluate Alex, George actually criticized Alex, calling him too conservative and not focused on signing clients at any cost. Sam was shocked when he heard this. It wasn't criticism, but rather the tone and disrespect that George had for Alex. This was before I mentioned or shared my cost analysis spreadsheet for every deal I developed. What was also unusual was that Denise was present at all the meetings. Denise had a master's degree in industrial psychology but had never practiced. Instead, she decided to raise their 3 children, who were now 12, 10, and 8 years old. Denise was Sam's wife and was very concerned about the business as it was her future too. She was never involved in the day-to-day operations, but I imagine they discussed a lot at home. At the end of the day, Sam and Denise met with each department head. I don't know what he told Alex, but that's what he and Denise told me. Pete was very pleased with the way you ran the department. He likes your approach to problems and your insistence on documenting everything. He loves the way you tell them that if they made a mistake, it means they are doing something. The main thing is not to repeat mistakes. I smiled at this. What Pete especially liked was how much control and independence you gave Sandra. She's only been with the company for about 15 months, and he sees how much you value the contributions of your employees and try to help them grow in their field. He gave you an A+. I held my breath, but it was Denise who spoke. Eric, you've been with us for about 5 years. You are like a son to us. We have seen how you grew professionally and how your colleagues respect you. When Sandra talked about you, she had a sparkle in her eyes. She said, "Respectfully, Mr. Murray, I'm lucky that you hired me, but I'm even luckier to have Eric as my boss. What a kind and smart person he is. What a wonderful teacher. He trusts me. I never expected to grow so much in my first year of work, and it's all thanks to Eric." Denise added, "And I told her, and he's a handsome man too." At that moment she stopped and looked at me. She spent most of the time looking at my husband and saying, "Yeah, he really is. I can't believe no one has gotten him yet." So I said, "Maybe you can do it. I know that he greatly appreciates your intelligence and professionalism." She replied, "Well, that's the key word, professionalism. He wouldn't do it, and I don't think I could. This could lead to dismissal." I continued and said, "You are right. Even if you had Sam's blessing, it could get very confusing. Eric is your boss. If this fails, at least one of you, and probably both, may be fired, even with my husband's blessing, to accommodate your personal needs." She stopped and looked at me. "Eric, she's not stupid," she said. "I feel like Eric wasn't talking to you about me for professional reasons." I finally ended the uncomfortable conversation by saying, "We're all adults. Sam knows that Eric wants to try to build a relationship with you. Based on what you said about Eric, I see that you are also interested, but extremely hesitant. Sam, and I don't want to interfere with your happiness. This will be the last time we discuss this. Everything that happens between you personally concerns only the two of you. We trust that both of you are professional enough to do your best and keep the company out of your personal lives. This is the investment we are making in both of you. I'll give my opinion to Eric, and I'll leave it to you two to decide." Denise, Sam, you are like second parents to me. She'll probably get tired of me after the second date if I get to that point, and then she'll leave and sue you for harassment, I said, with tears in my eyes. Sam finally spoke. She actually said at the end, "I'm willing to sign a document waiving the possibility of suing for harassment if I have a relationship with Eric or even attempt to build one. My father probably won't be happy with me, but if we ever become a couple, he'll meet Eric and know it was worth it. Please prepare the document." Eric, I don't know what's going to happen, but this girl thinks about everything. I stood up, hugged Denise, and shook Sam's hand. "Thanks, guys. I think I better call her tonight." I left. 30 minutes later, I was home and called Sandy's number. Sandy lived at home with her father and younger brother. This was the first of many calls I made to that house. "Hello, can I talk to Sandra, please?" Her brother answered. "Of course, who's calling?" "Please tell her it's Eric Shaw." And then I heard him yell, "Sandy, your boss is on the phone." And then I heard her answer, "I'll take it in my room." "Hello? Hi, Sandy. Boy, you're not wasting any time. I just wanted to talk to you before work tomorrow. Have you discussed this with your father? He wouldn't approve." "I think you should. I think you should tell him about the conversation with Sam and Denise. If he mentions the issue of harassment, tell him it is being discussed. If he doesn't mention it, I don't think it's worth volunteering to talk about it. I'd like to invite you to dinner tomorrow night if you're free so we can keep our personal lives out of the office. You can tell me tomorrow what your intentions are. If you think this is a big mistake and are not interested in it, or your father convinces you not to do it, I will try to respect your wishes. I have the utmost respect for you after hearing from Denise and Sam." "Eric, was it your idea to have Sam and Denise talk to me first?" "No, it was their idea. I only spoke to Sam one-on-one, he spoke to Denise, and then they both spoke to me." "Was this whole assessment a cover to talk to me?" "I don't know. I guess they got value from it from all departments, maybe. I don't even know Sam's deepest thoughts." "Okay, Eric, I'll talk to my dad. I'll tell you tomorrow. Good night." "Good night, Sandy." I usually arrive at the office between 8:45 and 9 o'clock. Sandy and Pete also came at this time. The next day I arrived at 8:15 and Sandy was already there. We both grabbed coffee and returned to our tables. Pete hadn't arrived yet, so we had a few minutes. "What time will you pick me up?" she asked. "I guess that means the answer is yes," I said with a big smile. "Have you talked to your father?" "Yes, he was not happy. He mentioned the issue of harassment. He asked me if I felt pressured to go on a date with you. I told him that you were as professional as possible, a true gentleman, and gave me every option. But I would like to explore the possibility of a relationship. I explained that I was young and was approaching this with my eyes wide open. I also briefly told him about the conversation with Mr. and Mrs. Murray. He was really impressed with them and how they cared about our personal well-being before worrying about the financial implications it could have on them, and there are a lot of those opportunities." "Great, I'm looking forward to meeting your dad. He seems like a really great guy." "Take your time, cowboy. Let's see how tonight goes, and then decide where we are. Do you know my address?" I smiled. "The advantage of being the boss is that I have this information. Be ready by 8 p.m. Dress casually, and this is the last time we discuss this. Let's get to work." She smiled at me. I melted. Sandy looked at her computer screen, I guess to organize her day, and 5 minutes later Pete came in, and that was the end of the discussion. I had a really productive day. I was completely focused on work. Sandy told me later that evening that she had had a rough morning, but once she got down to business, everything was fine. The date was really pleasant. We were having fun. It was surprising that we weren't boss and subordinate for the first time. We went to a club, and then she asked if I wanted to dance. I smiled, and we danced. It felt good to hug her. I think I really fell in love with her quickly. Even if it was just a first date, I knew her for over a year. When I brought her home, I wasn't sure if I should kiss her goodnight. I don't usually do this on a first date, but we knew each other well. I tried a different approach. "Sandy, I had a great time tonight, and I would like to see you again. You don't need to answer me now. You can tell me tomorrow." "Eric, I don't have to wait until tomorrow. I'm happy to agree." I smiled. "How about Saturday night?" "Wow, it's only 2 days, of course. What time?" "I can come early. How about I pick you up for dinner at 6 o'clock?" "Perfect." She stood there smiling at me. I think she was expecting this, so I leaned over and kissed her quickly on the lips and said, "Good night, see you tomorrow and again on Saturday." "Good night, Eric." I will not retell the entire courtship process. We usually met once a week in the middle of the week, such as Tuesday or Wednesday, and every night on the weekend. We started kissing within a week and slept together within 2 weeks. Sandy met the boys and their wives 3 weeks later and then invited me to her house for Saturday morning brunch to meet her father and brothers, sister-in-law, and niece. The following weekend, we went to Colorado Springs to meet my sister and her family, and then my parents decided to come visit 8 weeks after we dated. Around that time, Sam called me into his office. I thought it was work-related, but it's not. Eric, I don't want to pry into your personal life, but what happened to you and Sandra? I was beaming from ear to ear. We've been dating for 2 months. I think I'm in love. Wow, you both are real poker players. Denise asked me what happened, and I said I didn't know. She asked me to pay attention, and I did. Could not understand. You behave the same way as before. I can still see how she looks up to you as her mentor and boss, and has complete respect for you. Is this true outside the office? On the contrary, it's the other way around. I'm like jelly next to her. Even though I'm a few years older, she's definitely more dominant in our relationship. If I thought her ick was high, her eck is even higher. Well, I'm really happy for you guys. I'll let Denise know about this. Thank you. After 4 months of meetings, we were thinking about the next step. Sandy still lived at home. I still rented. I wasn't sure whether to ask her to move in with me or just let her make me an honest man. So I did what any inexperienced guy would do. I asked her, Sandy, do you think you should move in with me, or should we just get married already? Eric, if this is your proposal, then it is the most pathetic proposal I have ever heard. I, uh, I, uh, wasn't making an offer. I was asking what the next steps should be. You're a guy, but if you want to propose to me, I suggest you talk to my dad first. We're pretty old-fashioned in our family. But if I do it and he agrees, is that the next step? Eric, I'm not moving in with you. If you want to marry me, talk to my father. And then it will definitely be yes? We'll see, but you have to be more creative than that. I thought about buying a house before asking her to marry me, but that would be getting ahead of myself. A few days later, I planned to arrive at work a little later. I called Sandy's house at 9 o'clock. Her brother was supposed to be at school, so hopefully her dad was home alone. Hello. Mr. Elkins? Yes, who is it? This is Eric Shaw from Sandra's work and her friend. Is everything okay? Did Sandra leave for work a while ago? I'm guessing so. I haven't left for work yet. I'd like to meet you for lunch one day this week. Why don't you come on Saturday? Sandra will be here too. Mr. Elkins, I don't want to come when Sandra is home. I want to talk to you alone. Is this work related? No, sir. It's very personal. Ah, I see. Well, that's very nice, Eric. I'm looking forward to our conversation. How about Thursday? I don't babysit my grandchildren on Thursday. I can cook something here. Thank you very much, Mr. Elkins. I look forward to our conversation too. See you on Thursday. Eric, please call me Norm. 9 days later, we all gathered at Bobby's and a very pregnant Juanita's. Jerry and Laura arranged nannies for their children. We played a game we made up, a version of Pictionary. In our version, there was only one person who could guess the phrase or movie, etc. Sandy was next in line to guess, and I used my friends to help me give her clues. Jerry started. He was writing something that started with, I hereby bequeath. And Sandy jumped up and said, Last will and testament. Jerry nodded. Bobby had the easy part, but he made it hard. He drew a tree. Sandy, of course, guessed tree, which was wrong. He then added a lot of leaves to his tree, and Sandy guessed the leaves. Wrong again. He then added small red berries to the branches. He somehow knew that Sandy would guess you, which was correct. Then it was Mac's turn, and he drew a bunch of lambs. Sandy guessed the goats. Mac shook his head, but made her keep guessing. Then she guessed the lambs. Mac smiled and drew a girl. Sandy said, Mary, so she had, will, you, Mary, and then she turned to me and I was down on one knee with the ring box open. She started crying and then realized, "Marry me." She hugged me. All the wives cried and hugged Sandy. My friends were all giving me high fives when Laura said, "Sandy, you didn't answer Eric." I looked at her. "That was a much better offer than your last lame attempt, but did you talk to my father first? You know these were demands." She took a page from the work. "Why don't you call him?" Sandy called her father, and through her tears and sobs, I heard her say, "Yes, Dad, I know he's a wonderful guy. I know that you really love him. I love you, Dad. Yes, you can tell my brothers. We'll come later. Bye." She hung up, turned to me, and gave me the biggest kiss and said, "Yes." We called my parents, said goodnight to our friends, and went to her father. The next day, Sunday, I decided we needed to break the news to Sam and Denise. I called Sam at home and asked if he would be free. I wanted to stop by for a minute. Sam asked me to come before dinner around 4 o'clock. I didn't ask if Denise would be home, but I hoped she would be. I also didn't mention that Sandra would be coming with us. We arrived at their house a little after 4 o'clock and knocked on their door. Denise answered. She saw the two of us and remembered Sandy from the only time they met. "Sandra, really?" "Yes, hello, Mrs. Murray, can I come in?" "Please call me Denise, and of course, is everything okay?" "Everything is better than just fine." Sandy showed Denise her ring finger. "Congratulations, this is wonderful." She called her husband. "Sam, I think you need to come here." Sam came downstairs and shook my hand, and then Sandy. He was so proud. He ran for a bottle of champagne, and Denise insisted we stay for dinner. At dinner, Sam said he wanted to throw an engagement party for us and invite the whole gang and their spouses. This was a new side of Sam that I saw. He had always been strictly businesslike, but now he was like a father pouring out his emotions. The next day in the office, he announced our engagement to the whole company and told everyone about the party. Everyone congratulated us, even George. Pete was the most surprised, how he, sitting in the same office with us, never noticed anything. The party took place a few weeks later, and that's where I met George's wife for the first time. She was a very elegant, beautiful, and sophisticated woman. I couldn't imagine them together. I also noticed that when George was around her, he was like her servant, catering to her every whim. I think this explained his behavior on trips, but of course did not justify it. If my story had ended here with, "and they lived happily ever after," we wouldn't be here today. Unfortunately, this was not the case, and I had to deal with what happened later. Sandy and I got married 6 months later. We were so in love. We bought our first house, a small 3-room house. With our 2 paychecks and a decent gift from Norm, we were able to make a down payment and take out a mortgage. Although we were married, we never showed physical affection in the office. We went to Hawaii for our honeymoon and returned to work a week later with great tans. It was during this time that I had my first cost analysis meeting with Sam. "Sam, thanks for taking the time." "Eric, what is this?" "I'm looking at a report that has 4 columns labeled S, A, G, and T. I see the row headings: total sales, number of customers, average, customer needs, costs, average launch period, and then there are the numbers. The only thing I immediately recognized was 9 million in the sales line under T, which was our 1988 revenue. Sam, S is for Sam, A is for Alex, G is for George, and T is for everything. As you can see, your sales last year amounted to $1,500,000. Alex had $2,500,000 and George had $5 million. Your average sale was $375,000, Alex's was $250,000, George's was $125,000. You had 4 new or repeat clients, Alex had 10, George had 40. 54 clients were served by Sandra 24, Pete 18, and the remaining 12 by me. The total launch costs and the number of days are indicated there. In your business, it was 400,000. Alex's was 1,300,000. George's was 3,500,000. So the gross profit on all sales of your sales was 1,100,000. Alex's was 1,200,000 and George's was 1,500,000, which may seem decent, but when you consider the profit percentage, our salaries as direct costs, and consider that I make more than Sandra and she makes more than Pete, I don't have to deal with George's accounts, and you also have to consider the fixed costs of the business for correct accounting. I don't have all these numbers. Wow, this is very disturbing. Have you discussed this with Alex? No, I didn't think it was my business. So you turned to me first, bypassing him. I wasn't sure how to deal with it. I hope Alex won't be angry with me. Why did you do it? I've been to enough shows with George and Alex to see and talk to them and see how they work. I realize that their relationship is somewhat strained because George brings in a lot more business than Alex. I discussed this briefly with George, who didn't care about our profitability, only cared about his commission. I see. I think I'll share this with Steve, our controller. I'll also mention something about Alex. I will tell him that since you are aware of the direct startup costs and your own salaries, I asked you to do this. He'll want to see results, so I'll tell him it's a little premature and that I'm waiting for Steve to complete the full picture. I will let Alex know that he should not say anything to George at this time. That was the last I heard about it for about 4 months. Sam asked me to continue to manage each deal as it came in. As 1989 came to an end, I decided to meet Sam again. I noticed the numbers don't look that good. I met with Steve and Sam, and Steve provided a much more complete picture. He took into account our fixed costs per client and showed that in 1988, despite our revenues of $9 million, our net income was just over $250,000, including everyone's salaries, including Sam. Sam received no commissions on his sales. He even broke down the net profit per client and included sales commissions. All of Sam's clients were profitable, some very profitable. All of Alex's clients were profitable, some not so much. Some of George's clients were outright losses, while others were somewhat profitable. I had 2 subsequent meetings, one with Sam and Alex, and then in early 1990 with Sam, Alex, and George. George was arguing with Sam, tried to explain to him how sales works, to which Sam replied, "George, you may have noticed that I've made a few sales over the years. Mr. Murray, not as much as me. That may be true, but my sales didn't cost me any money. Some of yours were worth it. There is no point in paying you commissions for losses. Mr. Murray, may I ask one more question? This is a sales meeting. What is Eric doing here?" Eric helped with the initial cost analysis, and since his department is directly responsible for the launch, I asked him to approve every sale from then on. What? What does he know about sales? He's just a boy. I tried to teach him, but he doesn't understand, George growled at Sam. Please calm down, Mr. Thomas. It will be so. If Eric rejects the deal, you can always appeal it to Alex. If Alex is confident that this should be allowed, he can appeal to Eric. If Eric still declines, Alex can always contact me if he wants. The same is true for all of Alex's deals. So you're saying that my child's food and clothing and my wife's dear needs will depend on young Mr. Shaw? No, all you have to do is bring profitable clients to SM Services. You have quite a few of them. You also have a few bad ones for us. George was silent. Then I looked up and saw him looking at me with hatred. He was full of hatred. I think I've now surpassed Alex as his most hated colleague at SM Services. Sandy, who was 5 months pregnant, knew everything. She always respected Alex and George and knew about my disgust for George, but I never told her about my personal disgust, only about professional things. It was one of those decisions I had to make to separate the personal and professional. I told Sandy about my new role and that I would be relying on her and Pete to take on some of my workload. I also mentioned to her that Sam gave me a raise of $20,000 a year plus stock options. She was shocked. The last thing I told her was that we were going to hire someone new since I would have less time, and she would be going on maternity leave soon. Despite her strained relationship with George, Sandy still managed to get along with him and respect him. George must have assumed that I would tell Sandy about business matters, so he was pleased that at least one of the shows at SM Services was still sucking up to him. When Sandy reached 9 months of pregnancy, she became very tired and irritable. I tried to be as supportive as possible. It happened that she cried at night and told me that she really missed her mother. All I could do was sympathize. She didn't have that kind of relationship with her father, and her daughter-in-law was only a few years older than her. My mother lived in Florida, and we did not have a close mother-daughter relationship. The closest thing I had to a senior female mentor was my sister Evie, who lived in Colorado Springs. Evie was 5 years older than me, but even this relationship was not the same as with my real mother. On April 28, 1990, our son Scott was born. It was the happiest day of my life. The birth was a little difficult and after very long contractions. Sandy was a true fighter. She was now a housewife, and her longing for her mother became stronger and stronger, especially when she became a mother. I understood all this. I tried to be as supportive as possible. But no matter what I did, it was wrong, and now, for the first time in our 18 months of marriage, Sandy started yelling at me. This went on for a month or two. Scott was a sweet boy. He was very calm. Sandy was a great mother, but I became the villain. Every time she missed her mother, it was my fault. I thought about talking to Norm, but she would be very angry with me if I did. One day, I was using my brand new mobile phone during my lunch break and left the office to call my sister. Evie was understanding. She said she would try to spend more time with Sandy and help. Evie had 3 children of her own, so she knew what motherhood was like, and although our mother was on the phone, she was several thousand miles away. Sandy was really nice to me that night and told me that Evie had called and would be over the next day. When I came home the next day, Sandy was glad Evie had come. She told me that she really loved my sister. I thought maybe we could get closer that night. It had been 3 months since we had last been intimate, since she was 8 months pregnant. Sandy let me kiss her, but she said she wasn't ready yet. I hugged her, and we clung to each other. Her moodiness continued for about 4 months, and then she said she was ready to go back to work. Scotty could go to daycare, and her dad could help out 1 or 2 days a week if needed. Everyone was so happy to see Sandy back at work. Tammy, who was a new member of the team, had only worked with Sandy for a month before her birth, and was especially pleased to no longer be the only woman on the team. I think the night after Sandy's first day at work was the first time we were intimate in 5 months. However, it was not the same. It was as if Sandy just let me do whatever I wanted. It was strange. I noticed that the more responsibility I gave her at work, the better our family life was. It was strange. Sam was worried that we would bring problems at home to work, but it was the opposite. More interesting work led to better family life. Sandy was still moody. Her mom wasn't there when Scotty rolled over, when he began to crawl and his first tooth appeared. Each new exciting stage for Scott depressed Sandy and made her yearn for her mother. Sandy had been on the job for 5 months, and we needed to send someone to the first 1991 show. I couldn't go because I was very busy with new responsibilities and I had a growing department. I asked Sandy whether to send her or Pete. She got angry with me. How could I think like that? She has a lot more experience than Pete. Is it because she is a woman, because she is my wife, because she is a mother? I didn't know where it came from. I thought you wouldn't want to leave Scotty for 2 days. Why? You've been to 2 exhibitions since he was born. Nothing stopped you. Sorry, I thought that if I gave you a choice, you would feel less pressure. You're much more qualified than Pete. I just didn't know how new mothers felt. At this, she shouted at me. And I don't know, and I have no one to discuss this with. I can't believe you said that to me. Darling, I'm sorry. Please forgive me. I try to manage. She screamed at me again. Okay, this is all my fault, and poor little Eric can't handle Sandy the bitch. I just wanted to hug her and took 2 steps towards her. She stepped back and said, "Maybe you should sleep in the guest room tonight." She turned and went upstairs to our room. This was the first night in our married life that we slept in separate rooms. The next morning she was calmer, and we dropped Scotty off at daycare on the way to work. Sandy asked me about the trip. I said it would be next week. She is due to fly out on Wednesday morning and return on Friday evening. She asked where exactly, and I said New York. She was delighted. She had never been to New York. My older sister Elizabeth lived on Long Island, but I didn't think the schedule would allow them to meet. The exhibition starts on Thursday at 9 a.m. and ends on Friday at 3 p.m. There is a 6 a.m. flight back to Denver that arrives at 7:30 a.m. local time. You can be home by 9 o'clock. Who will go, Alex or George? I don't know, I'll tell you later, but it will be a different experience. Alex is very calm. George becomes the life of the party. What do you mean? After dinner, which usually takes place between the two of you, the participants go together to a club or bar. Alex will be sitting in a booth, sipping a drink and trying to get a few things done. George will wander around, laughing with everyone. I usually leave after about 30 minutes of watching George entertain the crowd. Alex and I stay together for a couple of hours before he decides to call it a night. Well, it looks like George is a lot more fun. I know you don't like his methods, but he brings in a lot of business for us. Last year, he brought in a lot less. He probably blames me for this. He lost probably a third of his salary and commission because of Sam's new policy. That's one way of saying it, or you could say it's because of Sam's deal breakers. I didn't answer her. How could Sandy blame me for not making bad deals? We didn't have data for 1990 yet, but I was confident that although our revenues were down 20%, our profits were 2 or 3 times that, even though my department had grown in size. Later that day, Sandy got what she wanted. It was George, and when he heard Sandy was coming, his smile was visible. Well, I'm lucky that this time the more beautiful one from Shaw will go. I'm guessing the grunt told you about the drinking requirements. I couldn't believe George called me a swashbuckler in front of my team. It was extremely unprofessional. I was a little nervous, wondering what else he would tell Sandy on the trip. The only thing I wasn't worried about was that he would make a move on my wife. He told me he never started with married women. He would have to be crazy to start with her, and I trusted her that she would never cheat on me. That, and the fact that we've had sex maybe 5 times since Scotty was born, and she didn't like it at all. Sandy called me Wednesday night from her room. Hey, darling, thanks for this. New York is amazing, although I didn't see much. We should go here on holiday someday, maybe when Scotty is a little older. Have you met any clients, existing or potential? Yes, I met quite a lot. They were all very nice. Many people congratulated us on the birth of Scotty. They were somewhat surprised to see me here. I told them that my son was in good hands. How did Mr. Thomas behave? Wow, he's such a player, and a lot of women circle around him. I never noticed how good-looking he is, and he has a gift for communication. It seems like 2 or 3 women were fighting for him. I'm not sure who he left with. I can't believe he's so open about his affairs. I felt a pang of jealousy. Just be careful, he might get too friendly. What, you don't trust me? I didn't say that. Of course I trust him. Plus, he told me he doesn't start with married women. Wait, you knew he was like this. Why didn't you ever say anything? Wow, he acted towards me as if I knew. I didn't want to say anything. I try to be as professional as possible. Eric, I'm your wife. I think you should have told me something. Sorry. Suddenly, she was angry with me again. I'm tired of hearing you say sorry. I was going to apologize again, but I realized it would be bad, so I said, Honey, you have a big day tomorrow. I love you. Good dreams. She answered monotonously, Okay, bye. She hung up. There was no I love you, no thank you, nothing. She didn't call Thursday night. Maybe she's still angry with me. I was waiting for her on Friday evening. She took a taxi from the airport at the company's expense. When she walked into the house, there was something in her eyes, I could tell. She almost couldn't look me in the eye. I wanted to kiss her, but we just hugged. I missed you, I said. Me too. How was the exhibition? You didn't call last night. The exhibition was great. I learned a lot. Even your friend George. He explained the things you don't like, and how you're making his job harder. He wasn't trying to denigrate you, he was just explaining his point of view. He claims that you don't understand enough about sales to turn down some potential deals, but that's what Mr. Murray decided. Well, I'm glad that at least he understands our thinking. If Sam and Alex can do it, then so can George. Why didn't you call last night? We were still hugging. I felt her tense up. I was at the bar until late at night, trying to make some deals. I even kept George with me until late at night, and then I was so tired and fell asleep. It sounded reasonable at the time. I told her that Scotty would be glad to see her in the morning, that he was a very good boy. Again, she tensed. I said I'd take her bag upstairs. She said she was going to take a shower. I went to bed, turned on the night light, and read a book. I heard Sandy blow drying her hair, and a few minutes later, she came out wearing a very sexy nightie. It was almost transparent, and I could see that she had nothing underneath. She climbed into bed, and from the moment I turned off the light, she was all about me. I don't know what came over her. She took off my pajamas in no time. I have never seen her so aggressive in our love life, and she was practically non-existent before she left, and for the last 10 months. I was trying to think about it on Saturday morning. I was making breakfast for Scotty and Sandy was still sleeping. Something was very strange about her. She had that look of guilt when she came back into the house, and last night I was sure it was the same look. I didn't know why, but I was sure that she had cheated. I didn't know if it was a client or a random person. I hoped it was a random person. I hoped I was wrong. Saturday night, again she was aggressive in her love life. This time it was more like the old Sandy before she got pregnant. After we made love on Saturday night, I told her, I think I should take you on trips more often. Wow, we haven't made love 2 nights in a row since you were pregnant. I was just joking. I saw her tense up. Aren't you happy? Sandy, like a week ago, would have screamed at me and said, nothing makes you happy. But this Sandy felt bad. I even saw a few tears. I hugged her. My love, I'm so happy. I was just having a conversation. She fell asleep in my arms. On Monday at work, I started acting like I wasn't feeling well. I pretended to be sick. I told Sandy I was going home. I took a taxi. When I got home, I called Mac. Mac, hi, this is Eric. Hey, brother, what happened? I need a favor, and it's a big one, and I don't want to discuss the reasons. What service? I'm going to ask you something, and I need you to keep it a secret from Jerry, Bobby, Alicia, and Sandy. Okay, what about Laura and Juanita? And them too. I just thought the guys and your wife and my wife included them. What can I do for you? How much do these home security cameras cost? We have options from $500 to $3,000. How many rooms do you need? I didn't want to say 2, my bedroom and living room, so I chose the whole house. I want all the bedrooms, living room and kitchen, and all the entrances. I think the bathrooms can be done without them. I have something for $2,000. May I ask why you don't want Sandy to know? Mac, I don't want to scare her. With the baby and all, please don't say anything. No problem. How can I set this up without Sandy finding out? I'll be home tomorrow. Okay, see you at 10 a.m. Okay, thank you. When Sandy and Scotty got home, I was sleeping in our room. I wasn't even sure what I was doing. If she cheated on me, it would be with some guy in New York. No one from Denver. She seemed guilty. I think I'm just being paranoid and trying to protect myself in all cases. The next morning, Sandy got dressed early. Honey, how are you feeling? The truth is that I really felt bad about my thoughts, but I didn't admit it. Much better, but just in case, I'll stay at home one more day. Everyone will think you're on your deathbed. Eric Shaw rarely misses a day of work and has never missed 2 in a row due to illness in his SM career. So, you will assure them that tomorrow I will be 100%. Thank you. Mac arrived at 10 o'clock. He installed cameras. We left the system base in the basement along with the recorder. I was the only one who ever went down there. There were suitcases, my tools, etc. I wasn't sure when I would find time to review the records, and the system held the data for just over a week. I could pay for an additional service to automatically copy the backups. I thought it would be too difficult. I just had to find time to watch it. I returned to the office on Wednesday, and the only strange thing I noticed was that Sandy and George were trying to avoid each other. I wanted to make an appointment for the trip on Thursday. This was the first exhibition that I was not present at. I invited George and Sandy to a meeting in the conference room and asked Alex to join us. Previously, George would have been angry with me for asking Alex to join, but now he seemed to welcome it. George had a report of all the potential clients and business they were looking for. We looked at each client, and sometimes I asked Sandy for her opinion. I had already created a plan for each new potential client, and at this stage, I had already recommended to Alex and George if there was a client that would be a complete waste of time. Out of 12 new opportunities, I rejected only one at that time. It didn't mean that George would be successful with the other 11, and it didn't mean that I would approve of the other 11. Everything depended on the conditions. The only thing I noticed was that neither George nor Sandy could look each other in the eyes. I was more sure that Sandy had cheated and George knew with whom. Of course, I couldn't force George to help me, and I would never involve him in my personal affairs. The last person I would want to be beholden to is George Thomas. On Sunday morning, Sandy asked if we could visit her dad. Norm hadn't been feeling well lately, and we hadn't seen him in a while. I said I wanted to work from home, and that she should take Scotty and give me my best wishes. They left, and I went to the basement to check the records. Well, the system worked great. I felt a little awkward watching my wife make love to me in Friday's episode. I reloaded the entries and had about another week or so of entries. Over the next 4 weeks, I would usually take about an hour or so to look through the notes, and there would be nothing there. My paranoia was subsiding. At that time, I had to take a quick and unplanned trip with Alex, and for some reason I had no thoughts or concerns. It was a short trip. We flew from Denver on Tuesday afternoon to Dallas and returned the next evening. After meeting with clients in Dallas on Tuesday evening, I started calling home. It was 10 p.m. in Denver, and the phone rang about 3 times. I didn't want to wake Scotty, so I hung up. I returned home late on Wednesday evening. Sandy was already asleep. I decided to quickly look at the recordings. I quietly went down to the basement and started over from the beginning of the week. As usual, I usually fast-forwarded everything starting from the living room. I saw us leaving for work on Monday and returning on Monday evening. I saw us leaving on Tuesday, and I was carrying my overnight luggage. I saw Sandy come home with Scotty on Tuesday night, and then a little later I saw her run to the door. When I watched in fast forward, I didn't hear any sound, so I couldn't hear what she was saying at the door. She seemed to say, "Go away," but the person on the other side wouldn't leave, so she opened the door, and I saw George standing there. I stopped recording. I couldn't believe my eyes and didn't want to continue recording. I went upstairs to our bedroom feeling really bad, then ran into the bathroom and started throwing up. I haven't vomited since I was a kid. Sandy woke up and came over to me. I said it's okay. I must have eaten something that didn't agree with me. I told her to go back to bed. I brushed my teeth and went to bed. I tried to control my anger and my tears. I still haven't seen the recording, but my greatest unimaginable fears were knocking at my door. George knew something. The question was what he wanted from Sandy. In the morning, she asked me, "How do you feel?" "I feel nauseous and weak." "Do you want to go to the doctor?" "No, I'll see if it goes away." "Okay, I need to take Scotty. How was your trip?" "She was very nice. I tried to call you on Tuesday night, but no one answered. Were you somewhere?" "No, where could I be?" "I was home with Scotty." "I don't know. I thought maybe you'd go to your father or brother." "No, we were at home." "Did you have any guests?" She tensed for a second. "Guests? What kind of guests? You were not at home. Who could come?" "I don't know. Maybe someone from the group came to support you, or your father or brother." "No, just me and Scotty all evening." She just openly and blatantly lied to me. Now I am going to watch this recording. "Okay, I'll go back to bed. I'll call you later." "Okay, get well. I love you." "Yes, me too." I rewinded a little. I could see the time, it was 8 o'clock. This means it was 9 o'clock in Dallas, Alex, and I would still be at dinner, and George knew it. I heard a knock. He was loud and insistent. Sandy came running downstairs wearing a robe over her pajamas. Who is this? It's me, George. You know Eric is not at home. Please go away. I'm not here for Eric. George, please go away and forget about everything. Sandy, please open the door. I think there's something I need to show you. Just tell me what you want. Sandy, I have something I need to show you, and I don't think you want Eric to see it. Sandy slowly opened the door. It was chained. That's all I saw, although you could clearly see George. Maybe she didn't let him in. Maybe he showed her what he wanted and left. Show me. Let me come in. It's inside. George showed Sandy a large manila envelope. Okay, give it to me. No, let me come in and stop acting like a child. You've been ignoring me in the office since we got back. And you know why? It was a mistake. Let's forget about it. Sandy, let me in for the last time. Just tell me what you want. That's it, I'm leaving. I'm sorry it has to be this way. I feel sorry for you that Eric will find out. I couldn't see because George was on the other side of the door, and I only saw him through the chain door, but it turned out he was gone. Wait, okay, I'll let you in, but remember, I have a sleeping baby upstairs. Sandy opened the door. George walked past her and looked around our living room when Sandy closed the door. What do you want to show me? Before I show this to you, I just want to say that you were amazing. I've never been with a married woman before, and I can't believe you came to me. I was disgusted and shocked. I thought George had proof that Sandy was with someone else. I didn't expect to hear this. I waited for her answer, hoping and praying that she would deny what happened. George, I'm glad you had fun. My stomach hurt after that. I can't believe I cheated on my husband and all the people you. Why did you do that? I don't know. I was angry with him. I was stupid and immature. George, we should work together. Let's just move on. No. What do you mean no? This won't happen again, and besides, Eric told me not to start with a married woman. First of all, I didn't start with you. You started with me. In general, I wouldn't sleep with a married woman, but in your case, there is a difference, although I didn't think about it at the time. What do you want? I want you to convince that boring husband of yours to stop rejecting my business deals. I lost a third of my salary. My wife is driving me crazy. My kids are too spoiled, and if I don't find more income, I will go into serious debt. I already took out a second mortgage on my house. And why should I help you? Because of this. And by the way, I assume you understand that I have plenty of copies. George handed Sandy a manila envelope. Sandy slowly opened it and began taking what looked like photographs. I couldn't see them, but she raised her hand to her mouth, and her eyes were wide open, as if she was shocked. She looked through about 5 or 6 photographs and began to cry. How did you get it? What are you going to do? George had a grin like that. I've seen it many times. I'll make sure this gets to Eric. What do you think I will do? But then you will incriminate yourself. Yes, but I'll still fall if I can't take care of my business, so I'll lose either way. And your wife will just accept it. She shouldn't know. God, for an older, smart man, you're pretty stupid. If Eric sees these photos, it will be the end of your marriage, my marriage, and both of our careers at SM Services. So, let's make sure he doesn't see them. George, what power do you think I have that could make Eric consider some of your crazy deals? Sandy, it's up to you. Sandy returned the photos and envelope to George. Okay, I'll try, but I can't promise you anything. George started to turn around, but then stopped. Sandy, there's one more thing I want, and maybe it will help you convince Eric. Now what? She responded in a very angry tone that I was used to, but perhaps George wasn't. I would like to remind you of our evening together. Are you crazy? I won't do this again. You're forcing it, Mr. Thomas. Okay, do you think Eric will be back tomorrow evening? That's right. He'll have a nice surprise in the office on Thursday. Good night, Mrs. Shaw. And George turned to leave. He had one hand on the doorknob as Sandy screamed, "Wait!" George stopped, but did not turn to face her. "What do you want?" George turned around slowly. There was no smirk. He looked serious. "Strip. You're a pig." "I don't have damn time. I've been here for almost an hour. I told my wife I'll be back in an hour, so I'll be a little late. Now let's get on with it. Next time you waste my time, I'll leave." He looked very serious. Sandy began to sob, tears flowing, but her robe was removed, and then she took off her pajama top. My wife was standing topless facing my colleague. I felt even worse even after I heard about what happened in New York. "Pants too. What are you going to do?" "What, are you a fool?" And George began to unbuckle his belt and unbutton his pants. Sandy just stared at him as his pants fell to the floor. He was still wearing his shirt and underwear. Sandy was still wearing her panties. "What are you going to do? Want to have me in my own house with my 11-month-old baby sleeping upstairs?" "I'm not going to offend you. I'm going to do what we already did in New York. I will not use any violence at all." Sandy just looked at him. "Sandy, this is the last time. If I lift my pants and head for the door, all attempts to make me stop will not help. I will have to leave." George barked at her. Sandy just stared at him and started taking off her panties at the same time. "Turn around and lean over the sofa," he instructed her. She did as she was told. I was going to get sick again. When he finished, he lifted his pants, turned and walked towards the door. "Sandy, that was great. We should do it again. In fact, until Eric starts doing my deals, I think we will. This will just be a reminder. See you tomorrow. Good night, honey." George turned and left. Sandy didn't move. She sobbed and cried. Finally, she took her pants, found her top, and put it on. She didn't come up to our room. She just sat on the couch, covered her face, and cried. She must have been there for an hour because I heard the phone ringing. It was me who called. She looked up but didn't answer. Eventually, she came up to our room. I saw her get into bed from the cameras in our room. She sobbed, but eventually fell asleep. While I am watching all this, the phone rings in the house. "Hello." "Hi, Eric. How are you feeling?" It was Sandy. "Still not very good. I was just about to go back to sleep." I was lying. "Okay, honey, feel better. Maybe I can go home early. My boss is not here today." She tried to joke with me, but it didn't work. "Goodbye, Sandy." "Goodbye, Eric. I love you." There was no "I love you" response from me. I just hung up. I fast-forwarded to the morning and saw her get up, get dressed, put on her makeup, and get Scotty ready for kindergarten. She left for work. I wonder how their meeting at work went. I did not care. I wasn't sure what to do. Should I confront her, give her a chance, talk to Sam? I didn't care what happened to the business now, but George Thomas would have to go. But Sandy came across him in New York. Why? Yes, she was angry with me, but that's no excuse. I remembered her guilty look when she returned. I remembered how aggressively she made love to me immediately after she returned. Now I know why. I went up to our room. I thought about calling one of the guys, but I didn't want to. I thought about the conversation with Sam again. He would fire them both, but then they would both be worth firing. I had two big problems and several small ones. My marriage and my company. Yes, I took it as my business. Even though I only had a 5% option, it was still a lot. Sandy returned home at 4:30 p.m. with Scotty. I told her I was feeling better, but wanted to talk about something. She looked at me strangely, then smiled and said, "Give me a hint. What will we talk about?" "No, let me feed Scotty first. Give him a bath, while you put him to bed, and I'll make dinner." "Thanks, I need to relax. Would you like a drink?" "No. How was your day at the office today? Is there anything I need to know about? Trouble with Pete and Tammy? How are Alex and George?" Sandy told everyone except George. I wanted to insist, but decided to let the topic go. We had more important issues to discuss. Scotty fell asleep at 6:30 p.m., and my spaghetti dinner was almost ready. At dinner, Sandy asked me what was on my mind, but I said, later. She looked a little nervous. After dinner, we sat down in the living room, and I began. Before we start, I'd like to ask something about the trip to New York. Sandy looked very nervous. Yes? On the second night of the trip, when you didn't call, you said that you stayed late and even delayed George. How did you manage that? Sandy wasn't looking directly at me, or at the floor, or above my head. I explained to George how much business he could get if he stayed. I bet he wasn't happy. He likes to have sex when he travels. Yes, he complained many times, and every time a beautiful woman left, he grumbled that he missed another opportunity. Did you leave with him? She hesitated before answering. No, I left before him. So he could have found someone after you left. I don't know why you're asking me. I don't control his sex life. There was anger and nervousness in her tone. Then I lied to her and said, when George came back, I asked him if he had managed to spend 2 nights in bed, and he said, Eric, my boy, I never miss an opportunity like this. So there were a few women left when you left. She lowered her head and said, I guess it was. Sandy, are you hiding something from me? For the first time, she looked straight at me and said angrily, no, Eric, what is this, an interrogation? No, why would I question you? I don't know, it looks like it. Previously, I would have apologized, but not now. Now it's my turn to show anger. One more question. When I was in Dallas on Tuesday, what time did you go to bed? Sandy didn't think so. I don't know, maybe at 11. So you didn't hear the phone ringing or didn't want to answer. Eric, what's going on? What do you want from me? I want the truth. I'm telling you the truth. I don't remember the phone ringing. Okay, if you're telling the truth, then now it's my turn to confess. She just looked at me. 4 weeks ago, I installed a security system in the house and didn't tell you. Sandy was really scared. Why is this so important? The security system includes cameras in every room, and I have a week's worth of audio and video recordings. She looked at me and tears began to roll down her face. I continued. Last night when I got home, you were sleeping, so I quickly watched the tape. I scanned it at high speed and saw that George had come to visit us in the evening. That's why I threw up. Sandy looked like she was about to pass out. She tried to say something, but nothing came out. I watched the whole tape today. She lowered her head. Did you see how he had me? I saw how he blackmailed you, but he did not use violence. You could have prevented this. I couldn't. Then he would have told you that we slept together in New York. Now I raised my voice. What did you sleep with him? That you cheated on me, and it was you who took the first step. What did you promise him? Stay and I will make you good. Please don't yell at me, you'll wake Scotty up. I made a terrible mistake. I was mad at you. I'm terribly ashamed, and of all people, I cheated with George. This makes the situation even worse. Please forgive me. I swear it will never happen again. But it already happened, just last night, and it will continue because we both know that you could never force me to agree to a deal that would cost us money. What did you think would happen when I left next month? Maybe you could invite George into our bed. No, Eric, I'm sorry. He took advantage of me. Maybe I allowed it, but I felt like a victim. Sorry, but I don't call it that. And how do we get through New York? Sandy just looked at me. I continued. Sandy, we have 2 problems. One is our marriage, and I have no solution for it. The other is work, and that's what we'll do. I had the whole day to think. Tomorrow morning, I will call Sam and ask to meet outside the office. We will both be at this meeting. At the meeting, you will tell Sam that you are resigning from SM Services with immediate effect. You will also tell him that you allowed George to blackmail you into having sex. You tell him we have this whole scene on video. I'll ask Sam what his intentions are and explain that I can't continue working with George because of his blackmail and sexual abuse of you. Sam will either have to fire George or accept my resignation. He may have questions. I'll try not to touch New York, but I can't guarantee it. I will also tell him that I would prefer not to show the recordings to anyone, but if necessary, I will do so. Sam might ask about our marriage, and I'll tell him I don't have an answer yet. This will be a serious financial blow for the company. Eric, you probably won't believe this, but I love you so much, and I'm such an idiot. I'll do as you ask. Please forgive me. I don't want to lose you. We have Scotty. I'll sleep in the guest room. I don't know what will happen to our marriage. I need more time. What kind of wife sleeps with her husband's enemy simply because she's mad at him? She just looked at me and started crying. I walked away and heard her calling her mother. The next morning, I called Sam at home, very early, and said that I needed to meet with him on an urgent matter, and I would prefer to do it outside the office. He asked if it would be okay if I came to his house. I invited him to come to me, to which he agreed. He said he would arrive at 9 o'clock. I then called Pete and mentioned that Sandy and I would be late. I took Scotty to daycare while Sandy waited at home. When I returned, I saw Sandy greeting Sam as he walked into the house. We all sat down on the sofa in the living room. Eric, I didn't know Sandra was joining us. Sandy answered before I could. Mr. Murray, thank you for meeting with me and us. I asked Eric to call you, and it won't be a pleasant conversation. Sam looked very worried. Please continue. I have made serious mistakes in my personal and professional life and must resign with immediate effect. Sam glanced at me and saw that I had my head down and was supporting it with my hands. I had an inappropriate affair with George Thomas during our trip to New York last month, and George is blackmailing me into continuing the relationship and convincing Eric to approve of his crazy deals. I violated the company code of ethics, and worse, I violated my wedding vows and disrespected my husband. I don't know what will happen to my marriage, but I should not continue working at SM Services because of my behavior during a business trip. Sandy cried and sniffled most of the time. This was not the agreed-upon scenario. She shouldn't have mentioned New York. Sam had tears in his eyes. He looked at me and saw that I was broken. Sandy was now openly sobbing. Sandra, I am very disappointed in you. I assume Mr. Thomas will not confirm this, so it will be your word against his. Sam, I have everything on tape, I interrupted. I would rather not show you the tape because it would be very embarrassing for Sandy, but if necessary, I can let you listen to the audio recording. Sandy didn't know about the security system I installed. Sam comprehended everything he heard. He was silent for a long time. Can I ask what will happen to your marriage? As you both know, Eric is like a son to us, and Denise and I are very attached to you, Sandra. We haven't focused on that yet. I guess this will take some time. I wanted to resolve the issue with the company first. Obviously, I cannot work in the same company as a man who had an extramarital affair with my wife, blackmailed her into having sex a second time, and continues to blackmail her into having more sex and causing financial loss to the company. This was the first time Sam had heard about the second episode, and he might have understood why it would have been awkward for Sandy if he had watched the tape. He also realized that George needed to be fired for his destructive behavior. I assumed that at this time he was considering the financial implications. We'll lose our best salesman, although he wasn't selling much anymore, with George's sales falling, and our best account manager, other than me as the department head. I need to meet Mr. Thomas. I think I need Alex to join me for this meeting. Eric, Sandra, sorry for bringing Alex in. We all knew about the problems that could arise when we gave our blessing to your marriage, although I did not foresee such a problem. I understand. I think Alex will be careful, although rumors will still spread around the office, I added. Sandra, I am so sorry for you, both personally and professionally. I suggest you both see a counselor. I also suggest that you come up with a very good story for your families and friends if your marriage does not survive. Eric, Denise, and I will always be here if you need us. I know how hard you try to keep the personal and professional separate. I'll call you later after I talk to Mr. Thomas." With these words, he stood up and left. We sat for about half an hour. Sandy just looked at me with a pleading look. I needed to leave home. I changed into sportswear and went for a walk. I don't know how far I went, but I returned after 3 hours. Sandy was still sitting in the same place on the living room couch. Sam called. He wanted to talk to you. I said that you went out, and I don't know when you'll be back. I didn't think it would be appropriate for me to ask about his conversation, and he didn't share. I nodded to her. I said that I would take the conversation in our bedroom, and then I corrected myself and said, "In your bedroom?" I heard her cry again as I was leaving. "Sam Murray, how can I help you?" "Sam, this is Eric." "Eric, please wait a second while I close my office door." "Eric, I didn't say anything to Alex and George before the meeting. It took place in my office as soon as I arrived. I began by asking Mr. Thomas if anything unprofessional had happened during his trip to New York with Mrs. Shaw. He had a straight face and said, 'Nothing unprofessional happened, Mr. Murray.' I said, 'Well, I heard a different story from Mrs. Shaw,' and he said, 'Mr. Murray, she came to me,' he said. 'I thought you just said nothing happened.' 'I didn't want to set her up, and her husband works here,' he said. 'I see, but since then your behavior has been only professional. Before I answer, let me tell you that Sandra met with me this morning and resigned. She told me everything.'" "What else did she say?" asked George. "Why don't you tell me, and please tell me everything and don't hold anything back. I know her husband works here, but as I said, she resigned. I don't want to lie, Mr. Thomas, or it could affect your severance pay if we go through with termination." "Eric, this man is cold-blooded. He didn't even break a sweat. He said, 'I have nothing to hide.' She came to my office on Tuesday and asked if I could come to her house on Tuesday evening while Alex and Eric were in Dallas. So I did. I played with him and said, 'You know that in your contract there is a morality clause that you violated. Even if it is true that Sandra approached you in New York, and even if it is true that Sandra came to your office on Tuesday, you still went to her house on Tuesday evening by your own admission. Is that so?' The first time I think he realized he was in trouble, he just nodded. I added, 'Is this your story, or is there something else you want to admit?' He looked at me with a look that I had never seen on his face. "Mr. Thomas, Mrs. Shaw did not know that her husband had installed a security system in their home. They have video and audio recording of your entire visit. What do the words blackmail and extortion mean to you? What does sexual violence mean? This is already a criminal offense. I expect your resignation letter on my desk within the hour." This man doesn't give up. He said, "They're bluffing. Have you seen the tape?" No, I didn't, but they were willing to show it to me, despite the great humiliation for Mrs. Shaw. I added, "I can ask them to show me the tape, and if their evidence is as they say, I will be forced to involve the police. If that is your wish, please let me know. I know this is your life, Eric, and I'm sorry about it, but it was a checkmate." He said, "You'll have my resignation letter within the hour." I have never seen this man so defeated. For me, it was as good as his own confession. "I will announce George's departure tomorrow. You should let everyone know that Sandra is dealing with personal issues, and in a week or two, I will announce that Sandra has resigned. This is the best I can do for you." "Thank you, Sam. See you tomorrow." I went downstairs and Sandy still hadn't moved. "Do you know any marriage counselors?" I asked. "No. Do you really think we need one?" "You are crazy." "Well, maybe, yes, of course we need it. You disrespected me. You broke our vows. I don't trust you. I'm not even sure if you trust yourself. Your behavior over the past year has been erratic. Probably since a little before Scotty was born. I don't know what's happening to you. You need serious help. I need help, and we need help. Sandy, I love you with all my heart. I never thought I could love someone as much as I love you, but you have problems and you have to deal with them. I can't continue living like this. We should have done something before your episode, your uncontrollable anger. You are constantly angry with me. The only thing I'm grateful for is that you are at least a wonderful and caring mother to Scotty. She just looked at me like a lost puppy with tears in her eyes. I'll call Alicia, she's a therapist. She probably knows someone who does marriage counseling, although I'm not sure that's your primary need. I'll ask her to be careful, but I'm guessing she'll tell Mac. Alicia gave me the name of a family therapist. We went to therapy for over a year. 1 week it was just Sandy, 1 week it was both of us, and after 8 weeks or so it was just me and Dr. Robinson. That was our routine for the next 12 or 13 months. Dr. Robinson was one of Alicia's professors at the University of Colorado. She was quite experienced. In short, she explained to me that the cause of Sandy's problems was her mother's illness when she was a teenager in high school, and even though her mother died 5 or 6 years later, she was very ill for a long time before and after her cancer was discovered, and that also took time. Sandy has no sisters and became the head of the family at the age of 14 or 15, although she was not ready for this. Sandy recognized the causes of her problems and worked to control her anger. It was interesting that I was the only one on the receiving end of her anger, never her father, brothers, or Scotty. This was due to the fact that she replaced her love for her mother with love for me, although it was a very different love, and I could never replace her need for a mother. I asked the doctor, since Sandy now realized the source of the problem, if it could be controlled. Dr. Robinson answered very carefully, she couldn't promise. I asked her if it was possible that Sandy would cheat on me again if she got mad at me again, and again the doctor couldn't promise. I asked her what should I do. I cannot stay in a marriage where my wife has uncontrollable anger with a tendency to cheat. The doctor asked me when was the last time Sandy lost her patience with me. That was a good question. I didn't remember. I was turning 32 years old. Scotty was almost 3 years old. He probably thought it was normal for parents to sleep in separate bedrooms. He also probably thought it was normal to never see his parents hug. We tried to be good parents. Sandy recently started working again in a different industry. It's time to make a decision. On the work front, things have never been better for SM Services. Alex hired 2 salesmen after George's retirement. I hired 1 person to replace Sandy, a young man named Tommy. We had Tommy and Tammy, but they weren't a couple. In fact, Tammy had a boyfriend and Pete got married. Our department was growing. Sometimes the guys would ask about Sandy, but I would just say I'd give her their best wishes, and I usually did. Alex, a few months later, came out with me and was very supportive. He knew we were in therapy. Sam also knew I was in therapy. I only trusted Sam and Denise for details. I heard that George got divorced. This made me happy. I never spoke to his wife, and I'm not sure Sandy did. It's not something we would talk about. I was glad I wasn't involved in it. Our families knew we were in trouble. They never knew the reason. Sandy once told me that she told her father that she was the cause of the problems, but never explained why, even despite his persistence. Of our friends, only Mac and Alicia guessed the reason. I swore them to secrecy. I think they kept their promise. My life was going nowhere. Business was going great. My cost analysis spreadsheet became part of the sales process, and Alex and I worked closely together on prospects. Our sales were approaching $15 million a year with about 12% net profit. In George's day, our net profit was about 3%. I was beginning to find financial security, but I was in a loveless marriage. Sandy, I've made my decision. Solution. About what? She seemed unaware of my emotional needs and was happy with the status quo. Sandy, I think it's time for us to get a divorce. She just looked at me like a deer in headlights. You seem surprised. I thought everything was fine with us. I thought our sessions with Dr. Robinson were helping me and us. Sandy, we haven't made love in over a year. We don't sleep in the same bedroom. Our son doesn't even know his parents love each other. We never hug. Eric, I'm ready for you to come back to our bedroom anytime you want. I haven't cheated on you for over a year. I don't look at other men, not that I did before my 1 episode. I really try to control my anger. I think I'm succeeding in that regard. What else can I do? Don't know. Maybe that's my problem. I asked the doctor for guarantees, and she could not promise. This is not fair for any of us. We both should have love and happiness. I still love you, but I can't be with you. I do not know what I want. I just think we need to move on. We both cried. Sandy actually came up to me for a hug, and I let her. She wanted to kiss me, but I pulled away a little. She hugged me again. I guess you've been thinking about this for a long time. I know you. Yes, I thought so. What do you think is fair for Scotty? Well, I think he should stay in the house with you. My proposal is that you live in a house that will belong to both of us, at least until Scotty turns 18. I will find a place nearby. When he turns 18, we can sell the house, or one of us will buy out the other's share. In exchange for you living in the house rent-free for the next 15 years, I think you should only get 10% of my shares in SM Services. I will, of course, pay for all of Scotty's upkeep and college expenses. As for child support, I think we can agree on a fair amount. However, if you get married or live with someone else, alimony stops immediately. If you get married and move into his house, then we can sell the house and split the profits. I will continue to pay my mortgage. However, if you get married and stay in this house, then you will have to pay me rent until Scotty turns 18. I think we can agree on a figure for that. I will amend my insurance policy to make Scotty the sole beneficiary, and he will not inherit anything until he is 21 if my death occurs before his 21st birthday. As for custody, I think it should be joint. I will take him on 2 out of 3 weekends and once on a weekday, either Monday or Thursday, so that it is 3 days in a row. Summer should be divided equally. We will change holidays every year. I'm guessing you've really thought about this for a long time. Is there anything I can do to change your mind? No, sorry. Okay, Eric, I won't stand in the way of your happiness. I know that I love you more today than on our wedding day. I'm sad for us, for you, for Scotty, and for myself. Can you help me talk to my father? He'll be so upset. Yes, he will always be my father-in-law, regardless of our legal status. Fine, how are you? Maybe a little better now that I see you both together. Norm, we didn't want to give you the wrong impression, but we have finally agreed on a divorce. I saw that his heart was broken. Why? Do you love each other that much? Sandy intervened. Dad, as you know, we have been going to therapy for over a year. All I can say is that there are some problems that I caused. The therapist helped me understand the source of the problems, and I am working hard on myself, but I have to be fair to Eric. We haven't slept in the same room for over a year. We don't want Scotty to grow up in a loveless home. He looked at me and said, Eric, I have always loved you like a son. I hope you will be fair to my little girl. This was the first time I saw Norm cry. Sandy told me he didn't cry when her mother died. One day she asked him why, and he replied that he wanted to be strong for his children. I told Norm about my proposal. He said he would discuss this with his lawyer, Arthur Goodman. However, he asked to wait a week since Arthur had just buried his wife. I asked how old she was, and Norm said they were both 40. Pancreatic cancer, 6 weeks, and she was gone. At least I had 5 years with my Linda before she died. The next day, I asked Sam to recommend a lawyer. A few days later, I met with Sam's lawyer, Bill Harrison, and within a few weeks, Bill and Arthur had worked out all the details. Dr. Robinson was also saddened by our news. She said she would continue to work with Sandy, and if I wanted, she would see me too. I didn't think it would make sense. I found a 3-bedroom apartment a few blocks from Sandy's house. I set up a room for Scotty and tried to get my life back together. For the next 2 years, I was really dedicated to my work. The guys' wives tried to set me up with people, but they were all no match for Sandy. Sandy, for her part, mentioned from time to time that she would be waiting for me when I was ready to return. I smiled. I still loved her. I knew it. I just couldn't make up my mind. The pain was too great. What did Jackie tell me years ago? If you deceive me once, shame on you. If you deceive me twice, shame on me. Well, I didn't want to get to the point of shame on me. Sandy and I met one Sunday afternoon to plan Scotty's birthday. She seemed hesitant to tell me anything. Sandy, what's on your mind? I have a feeling you want to say something. Eric, I don't want you to find out about this from anyone else. I'm dating someone. Well, if that's not a punch to the stomach, then I don't know what is. It hurts like never before. I tried to be happy for her. That's great. Do I know him? Yes, I think you know him. I think you met him during our divorce. It was my lawyer, Arthur Goodman. Even more silence on my part. I remembered. It was this old man. It seems he had grown children. What does she need from him? Yes, I remember him. Isn't he a lot older than you? I mean, I was 5 years older, but he must be at least 10 years older. He's 42, so he's 13 years older. I didn't go out often. I always waited for you to come back. He is one of the few men with whom I have had contact, and as you remember, he is a widower. He spent a long time wooing me, so I finally agreed about 6 weeks ago. He is the only one, besides Sam and Dr. Robinson, to whom I have shared the details of my infidelity. He really didn't understand how you could give up on me so easily. Another blow to the stomach. He said, "One man's loss is another man's gain." He gave me back my confidence. I really like him. However, I would break off all relations with him in a second if you gave me another chance. That's it. I lost it once, or maybe I left it. Now she almost forces me to make a decision. No one forces me to make decisions. I'm too smart and proud for that. I did not accept her challenge. My second mistake. Sandy, that won't happen. I'm happy for you. I wish you happiness together, but I have concerns for Scotty. Eric, we've only been dating for 6 weeks. I'm not ready for marriage yet. I share your concerns. I just wanted you to know. Does he have grown children? Yes, his 18-year-old son is going to college next year, and his 16-year-old daughter is entering her senior year. Will this be weird for you? Like I said, nothing happens that fast, but I've known his kids for years, and they love me. They want their father to be happy. I remember their mother very well, and we have something in common, losing our mothers at a young age. I was going to ask if they were suitable for each other sexually, but that would have been beyond acceptable. That night, I had trouble sleeping. The next day, I invited myself to Alicia and Mac's place. Alicia was also a therapist and was very helpful. Eric, she still loves you, but she has this handsome man who has been a family friend for years whispering sweets to her. I'm sure he's very lonely, and Sandy is a very beautiful woman. What did you expect? Don't know. It's not fair. She cheated. Why should she be happy? You are not fair to yourself or to her. She always left the door open for you. If you want to suffer and be miserable forever, you can't force her to do the same. Maybe I'm the one with problems. Maybe I should realize that people can make mistakes. This is ironic. I always teach my subordinates that mistakes are acceptable. The main thing is not to repeat them. Maybe I was afraid of making the same mistake by giving Sandy a second chance, but she probably would never make the same mistake. She learned this rule from me. I didn't follow my own rules. Alicia hugged me tightly and said, "Call her and tell her you want to try again." I looked at her. I can't. What's wrong with me? I made an appointment with Dr. Robinson. She listened to my problem, but unfortunately said that she was still treating Sandy and could not help me due to a conflict of interest. She gave me the name of another therapist, Dr. Allen. I never called him. 3 months later, Sandy and Arthur got married. It was her 30th birthday. I met Arthur several times during their courtship. He, of course, knew about our divorce agreement. They decided that for Scotty's sake, they would move into Sandy's house. This meant that I would now have additional income from the rent. They were required to pay me according to the divorce agreement. It also meant the end of my child support payments. It was a 3-room apartment, so it would be a little cramped. Rebecca, Arthur's daughter, will sleep downstairs, and when David, his son, comes home, he will share a room with Scotty. Scotty was now a big brother and had two new male role models. I liked Arthur's children. They accepted me as Scotty's father. About a year later, I learned that Sandy had officially adopted Arthur's children. When it came time to plan Scotty's 7th birthday party, I noticed something strange about Sandy. She told me, "Yes, I'm expecting a baby. Scotty will be a big brother." Another blow to the stomach. 5 months later, Rachel Linda Goodman was born. Rachel was Arthur's wife, and Linda was Sandy's mother. Sandy managed to get her life back on track. I was broken. Yes, I went out sometimes. I even had a 2-month relationship once. Nobody was like Sandy. I started to think that I was spending too much time with my ex-wife and her new family, but I didn't want to miss out on time with Scotty. I heard that the only thing Sandy and Arthur argued about was whether they would raise Rachel as a Christian or as a Jew, since Arthur was Jewish. He wasn't a practicing Jew, so I didn't understand the big deal. Of course, I got this information from Scotty. Scotty asked me why we didn't celebrate his bar mitzvah when he turned 13. I explained that he was not Jewish. When David got married and their first boy was born, they held a celebration of circumcision. I was invited, but I refused. Scotty asked about this too. I tried to explain that he should discuss this with his mother. He said that he had already discussed it, but she could not explain. Sandy was not yet 40, but she was already a grandmother. Meanwhile, when I turned 45, I had to cope with some sad news. My father died in Florida. He was 88 years old. My mother, who was very independent, decided to stay in Florida. In other news, Sam decided to slow down a bit. I already had stock options. Now he has appointed me vice president. I was given another raise and was now making over $250,000 a year. I had all this money and no one to share it with. A little later, after my father's death, my mother died. She missed him too much. 14 years flew by unnoticed. Scotty attended Stanford as an undergraduate and later received a master's degree in engineering. He even met a young girl in California. They got married and decided to stay there. It was strange to attend my son's wedding to my ex-wife. She still looked great. Arthur, no. He was unwell. Sandy mentioned that his heart was weak. Rachel, Sandy's daughter, was a real beauty. She looked a lot like her mother, and I practically remembered Sandy at her age. I think she was 19 at Scotty's wedding. Arthur's children and grandchildren all attended Scotty's wedding. 2 years after Scotty and Penny married, they had a boy named Frankie, after my father, Frank. A few months ago, Sandy called me in tears. Arthur had another heart attack and died. He was only 67. They had just celebrated their 24th wedding anniversary. I came to her house. Norm was already there. Norm is almost 80. Rebecca and her husband were there. David lived in the east, was on the road, and was supposed to arrive the next day. I saw young Rachel sitting alone and crying. She lost her father. I tried to console her. Scotty was trying to fly to the funeral, which was to take place the next afternoon. Jewish tradition dictates burial as soon as possible. It was so surreal for me. It was my family, but at the same time, it was not mine. Sandy came to see me last week to discuss Frankie's birthday and gift. It was 6 months after Arthur's funeral. She hasn't been to my house in years, probably since Scotty left for Stanford. How are you, Eric? The same as the last 30 years, unhappy. Why? You wanted a divorce? I never stopped you. I did everything you wanted. Who said what I wanted was best for me? What did you want me to do? Sandy, in business I always knew what to do, but in relationships you were smarter. I needed you to dictate the terms, not me. You let me dictate everything. Yes, I allowed it. I think I felt guilty, and you seemed so determined. Sandy, am I late? It depends. You've definitely been late for the last 28 years since our divorce. However, I'm only 54 and you're almost 60. I never stopped loving you, even during all the years I was married to Arthur. I simply made a commitment to another man, a man who wanted me with all my flaws. You did not want. Another blow to the stomach. This time I cried. Sorry, I ruined everything for us. At least I'm glad you were happy. Eric, I'm sorry. I wish I could be smarter and find a way to make you love me with all my problems. I wish there was a way for you to not be so scientific about guarantees. I wish there was a way for you to understand that for every rule there is an exception. I have to go home. I have a 22-year-old daughter at home. You know where I live, you know my number. She kissed me on the cheek and left. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.